Time to set foot inside the morgue with your hosts, Lee, Carl, and Rob.
And good evening, and welcome to another episode of the MMM. So tonight we're going to review the Western horror Bone Tomahawk. Before we get started, though, I thought we'd go around the table as we usually do, and we'll chat about any films we've been watching this week. So, Lee, do you want to start?
Recently watched that Run. It's a horror film, very much along the lines of Misery, but this time instead of it being an author and his fan, it's a mother and daughter. The mother's drugging her daughter and causing her to have a disability. Yeah, it's quite a harrowing watch, but it's decent. And the other thing, I watched Rolling Cell Block 99, which is the director of Bone Tomahawk's second film, and that's worth a watch as well. Very over-the-top violence, pretty much along the same lines of Bone Tomahawk as far as violence, but this one's set in modern day. It's a prison, and it's a guy who's being forced into a situation where he's got to do various violent acts to try and free his daughter, his wife, who's being held hostage. So
it's a chick flick.
That one too. It's a chick flick. Yeah, this director, it's all about the chick flicks and keeping the wives happy.
Cal, have you what have you seen?
I'm afraid I'm keeping my usual tradition of not knowing really anything about movies since the year 2000. And what did I watch? I watched a Blu-ray of a film called Newman's Law a couple of nights ago, which is an old film with George Peppard that's just come out on Blu-ray.
That sounds good.
No one will know what that is, but it wasn't a bad film, actually. It's kind of a 70s cop thing. Quite good. Apparently it was made for TV originally, and then they decided to release it to cinemas. Yes, that was quite fun. What else did I watch? I watched a Jackie Chan film called Shaolin Wooden Men, which has just come out on Blu-ray as well. And that was a bit of a blast from the past. But it's nice to see some of these films, looking really good and restored. And they look like new movies. They look like different films. Because I don't know if you ever saw them on VHS years ago, Lee and Rob. The quality of these prints was terrible, and it was panned and scanned. It wasn't in widescreen.
I remember was it Movie Drome? I think, or there used to be a Jackie Chan series of films shown on BBC Two in the 90s.
I think it was Channel 4, Rob. Channel 4 did. It was one Christmas. Yeah. They put a few on, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like it on TV, although I'd seen a few on video.
That's when I saw like Police Story and Armour of God and things like that. And,
yes. Yeah, in fact, those ones, they put on Police Story, Armour of God, Wheels on Meals, and Project A, I think. So they had those four on. Yeah, they were they're basically the best Chan films, so they pick well. In fact, you just mentioned Movie Drome. I've managed this week to secure a copy of one of the Movie Drome guides made in conjunction with the show, and this little guide has like Alex Cox's write-ups of the films inside it. So I haven't received it yet, but I've managed. There's one winging its way to me now. So
that'd be decent. I've watched a few things this week. I've watched Bombshell, which is about the investigation into sexism and internal abuse of women in Fox Network News. That was pretty decent. I thought it was going to be pretty bad because it had Nicole Kidman and Charlize Theron, but it turned out to be quite interesting. I watched On the Rocks with Bill Murray and Sophia Coppola's new film.
Not Alpha 2?
No, not Alpha 2. On the Rocks is about a playboy philandering father who slowly connects with his daughter because his daughter suspects that her husband's having an affair, and because of him recognizing all the signs, he takes her on this little road trip to look into the honesty of her husband. Mm-hmm. And then I tried to watch Nicolas Cage's new film Jiu-Jitsu, which, if you've ever seen Predator, is like Predator, but if you took everything that was good of Predator and took it out of the film and replaced it with Nicolas Cage and a zero budget, you would get Jiu-Jitsu. And I only made it 20 minutes through the film and I had to give up. So So yeah, sadly, I was going to recommend Jiu-Jitsu as a Manchester Morgue episode, but it's so bad it's not even worth reviewing.
I think he's occasionally in a film that's good. That has nothing to do with him being in it.
I mean, what's weird about Jiu-Jitsu, it literally has this big long list of actors at the beginning, and then finally it says "and Nicolas Cage," which suggests suggests he's only in the film for about 15 minutes, but
He was on set for a day. And he probably got paid quite a lot. But the video box presumably has his name above the title, above everyone else's.
Well, we'll cut to the chase. So tonight is episode 7, and this is Cal's baby this week. So each week we're choosing a film. Cal chose the Kurt Russell film Bone Tomahawk. So I'll let you go, Cal, with the summary of it.
I've no idea why we chose this film now. I mean, it's a first watch for me. It's a kind of film that seems to tick my boxes. I like westerns, and I'd heard it was it had a bit of horror crossover as well, without too much detail. So I thought this is probably going to be good. Okay, yeah. So here's the synopsis for Bone Tomahawk. 2 drifters who rob and kill travelers run afoul of a Native American tribe by desecrating their burial site. One is killed while the other escapes. 11 days later, the drifter arrives in a small town named Bright Hope and buries his loot under cover of darkness. Backup deputy Chicory reports him to Sheriff Franklin Hunt, who's played by Kurt Russell. Hunt shoots the drifter in the leg and sends John Bruder, played by Matthew Fox, to fetch the town's doctor. Arthur O'Dwyer, played by Patrick Wilson, is resting at home with a broken leg with his wife Samantha, who's the doctor's assistant. The doctor is drunk, so she's called to the jail to treat the drifter's gunshot wound to his leg. The drifter is left with Samantha and Deputy Nick overnight in the jail, and during the night, a stable hand is graphically murdered. In the morning, it's discovered that the drifter, Samantha, and Nick have been abducted by a Native American tribe of cave dwellers or troglodytes. Hunt forms a hunting party consisting of him, Chicory, Bruder, and Arthur O'Dwyer, despite him having a broken leg. After a difficult trek during which the hunting party disagree, fall out, and have their horses stolen, Bruder and Arthur O'Dwyer come to blows, and this worsens his leg injury. As a result, he is left behind to recover. The 3 are attacked by arrows, and all are injured. 2 of the attackers are killed, and Hunt and Chicory retreat, leaving Bruder behind, who's killed outright, but not before killing another Native American. Hunt and Chicory are captured and imprisoned into the Native American's cave, where they find Samantha and Nick imprisoned in an adjacent cage. It transpires the drifter has already been killed and eaten. They see Nick taken from his cell, stripped, brutally scalped, and eviscerated before being taken away, presumably to be eaten. Arthur wakes up and follows the trail. He kills 2 Native Americans and notices something in their windpipes, which turns out to be a whistle of some description. O'Dwyer cuts this out of one of the Native Americans and uses it to lure another tribesman close enough to kill him. Back in the cave, the leader has grown angry and pulls out Hunt from his cage, cutting open his abdomen and shoving a hot metal flask into the wound and shooting him twice. Arthur arrives in the cave to save the day, and Hunt kills the leader. Hunt stays behind due to the severe nature of his injuries as he swears to kill the 3 remaining tribesmen with a shotgun. The survivors escape to hear 3 distinct gunshot sounds in the distance as the threat from the cave-dwelling cannibal tribe seems to have been quashed, but at a terrible cost. And there you go. That's Habit. That is Bone Tomahawk. And actually, it's quite. I was surprised when I started it. For some reason, I had it in my brain. It was like a 90-minute film. This is 2 hours 12 minutes. This is not a short film to do a synopsis for.
Yeah, it flew by though. To be honest, wasn't it? It was, even though it's such a long film, and it has some kind of slow moments. I think the dialogue and the bits of action peppered throughout the film sort of keep it flying along at a good pace, really, doesn't it?
It does, because for these podcasts we do, I whenever we do a film, I usually like to break it into pieces so that I can really take it in each bit. But I ended up, it was a school night, literally a school night, and I said to myself, I'm only going to watch 30 minutes, and I ended up watching the whole thing because I obviously got into it, which is always a good sign. I mean, it is a slow burn. You know, any reviews you see on this film will say that you have to earn it, you have to stay with it. But the characters are so well scripted and, you know, cut out that it's definitely a good watch.
Now, would you call this, Carl and Rob? Would you call this a horror or a western? Do you think, or would you call it a mashup movie? What's your opinions on that?
I'd say it's firm. In my opinion, I'd say it's firmly rooted in West. It's got all the archetypes. It's got the gunslinger, the cowboy, the sheriff, the old timer, and it's got. But then it does have those massive horror stamps as well, like the Indian burial ground that you disturb, and the threat of the unknown, and but very much a western. I mean, I read about. I'd say that Zala, the director, he really wanted to do a western, which is not very popular to do, and it's hard to do. But
he was saying that it's really not the production companies now don't consider a western as viable as a project really, and he had to go to Europe to get it financed, which was
it's cheap, isn't it?
Pretty bizarre.
The films are cheap to make.
It's an independent production, this one, and going back to that question, I think for me it's certainly a western. Rob, you're right when you say all the kind of familiar western tropes are there. You know, there's kind of like a hunting party, there's a posse assembled. It's almost like I was thinking of there's a John Wayne film called Searchers, and although they're completely different in tone, there's lots of similarities between this film and that film, where I think Natalie Wood is kidnapped by a tribe of Indians, and John Wayne go out to try and track her down, and that's a great film as well. But this one takes a rather different turn, I think. So it's certainly a western, and it really launches into the film quite brutally. I mean,
the opening sequence,
it's like David Arquette, who plays one of the drifters. He looks like a rusty knife he's got, because he's really struggling to kind of slit this guy's throat, who he's just woken up from having been asleep.
And there's also Sid Haig as well, who's was in. I remember him from all the Rob Zombie films, Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand Corpses. You're under no misunderstanding what kind of a film it's going to be when you see him in it, and you see that first scene with the neck being brutally, and that bit of dialogue about the 16 veins or something in the neck that you have to cut through. Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
That's a lot of detail, isn't it? I mean, that's like a proper autopsy. It's like, and the fact is, what did put me off though is that David Arquette was doing it, and David Arquette in films and me don't really go together very well.
I think the only thing this film missed, if anything, was a brutal evisceration scene of David Arquette, where he's kind of brutally murdered and consumed by cannibals. He seemed to get off scot-free almost.
It's true. If Courtney Cox was in the film, he probably would have had that happening. But
I was going to say as well, apart from being a western, some of the shocking scenes, especially towards the end, were they put me in mind of the first times I saw films like Cannibal Ferox or Cannibal Holocaust, and also other kind of slightly lesser, maybe not as grim ones, but still pretty grim, like the original Hills Have Eyes, or perhaps even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's that kind of it's that otherworldliness of the villains of the piece. It's like this forgotten part of time where technology and progress has never reached them.
No, it's the threat. It's like Hills Have Eyes, like the threat of the unknown, the threat of the hidden frontiers. Also the aspect that the Americans think they can grab everything. I think it's a quote from his wife in the film where she says, the stupidity of man when they're in prison, and it's that idea that you think you can just grab and take, and then eventually one day it gets took away from you, which is what happens with the troglodytes. Also, I have to say that the film in it, this environment they're in, these deserts, and it's so brutal, isn't it? It's just like endless desert terrain and like sharp rocks, and there's no respite with there's no like scenic hills or valleys, is there, or flowers. Everything's dead.
That's right. There's no shots of Monument Valley or like the wagon train ploughing along on perfectly flat sand and terrain. This is you kind of really feel all the sweat and the grit of the
yeah.
journey as the posse kind of embark upon their on their quest. I think you really feel it.
It was very clever as well to have the Patrick Wilson character being injured. He's injured from the beginning of the film because it pretty much is clear from the beginning that the posse heads out that if you have an injury of any type, you cannot survive. You are not meant to survive, although he is a survivor. You were basically, you are dead. You are done. I mean, there's a horse gets injured in the film, and they put the horse down when it has a bad leg, when it gets injured. He's like hobbling, and you really feel it for him, don't you? It's every step across. He has to walk for miles and miles on his own, and it's like swirling vultures.
I dare say, in many other films, this character would just be set up with an injury, to be the dead meat character, and I think it was a nice touch that they didn't use him because the character was quite likable as well. He's
he is, yeah. He's really upright and honourable, isn't he?
I think this is the genius of the director, really, because he does surprise the audience all the way through the film. You're right, Carl. You are expecting him to be a lame duck and to get picked off, to be the first to be picked off, but he very much is there right to the end, really, isn't he? And even Chicory himself, he's not the most combative of characters, really. He's a bit of a lovable loser, but it's obviously no spoiler, but he survives right to the end. So he's kind of, the director is constantly surprising the audience with the way the twists and turns of the way the film works, which is part of what I think makes it so enjoyable.
There's no black or white characters, is there? Even like the gunslinger, he boasts of like he's killed more Indians than anyone. It's because you find out later in the film he's got a history, hasn't he? He lost his wife and child to Native Americans, and then he's got this vendetta and this kind of determination now, just to basically, he almost wants to put himself in the firing line because he's got nothing left to lose. There's a bit more to his character than just being a cold-hearted, gunslinger.
Yeah, I mean, even that character, you're expecting him to be that typical character in a film who you don't really know what his motivations are, and he perhaps might do something that gets the group into trouble, or he might do something because he's a bit trigger happy, isn't he? He's more intelligent than everybody else in the group, isn't he? And he kind of sets himself out. He's got dressed all in white. He's clearly thinks he's superior to everybody else, and that obviously doesn't make you want, as a viewer, to him. But ultimately, he's actually a good guy underneath. Like you say, you find out that his family was killed, which is he's not just a bigot. That's why he's got this motivation for vengeance.
A sign of a good performance is that, like, literally, it was 20 minutes into the film, or maybe longer, I suddenly realised it was the bloke from Lost. I mean, because he has a handlebar moustache, of course, and he looks quite smooth and slick.
Oh, is that Matthew Fox?
Matthew Fox. Yeah.
I wasn't a huge fan of Lost, to be honest. I found him quite wooden in that, really. But this is the best thing I've seen him in, to be honest. I mean, it's a good character, but yeah. This
film did have a very interesting supporting cast, actually. Apart from the principals, there's David Arquette, who we mentioned, who plays Drifter. Yeah. The mayor's wife was played by Sean Young, and I've not seen Sean Young in a film for many years. She was a very popular actress in the 1980s. I haven't seen her in anything for years, probably since Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. So I don't know what she's been doing. She's got a little role, so that's good to see her. The chap playing the piano at the start for, he said he played 3 for 10 cents, and he's asking him why it costs more because he got tired.
Oh yeah.
That actor is a chap called James Tolkien, and anyone who's seen Back to the Future may be familiar with him. Kind of bald-headed guy with, I think he plays. Is he a teacher at the school?
Doesn't he come out with a shotgun or something out of the school or something when it's?
That's right. Yeah, in 2, Back to the Future 2.
Strickland.
Yes,
Strickland. Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah, that's it.
And the other actor, who I have to say I didn't notice until the final credits, but there's kind of another actor who's popular in the early 80s called Michael Paré. And again, he's someone I've not seen anything for years. I honestly didn't notice him in this film until I only watched it once. So I'll go back and check. Michael Paré was in this. He was a big actor in the early 80s as well. So obviously the director's got a bit of an eye for the some of the actors from the not the older generation, but kind of cult actors who've appeared in cult films that he's obviously keen on. He's like, I'll give a little job here to Sean Young and James Tolkien and Michael Paré. That's
I mean, what an amazing cast to get for your first film. And I believe most of them were on sort of minimum wage, really, even probably Kurt Russell. I mean, obviously it would have been a good rehearsal for him for his role in Hateful Eight, where he plays almost the same character, just dialed up a bit. But yeah, it's
correct,
amazing, really,
yes.
the cast.
Have you seen the Hateful Eight, Leo Rob?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's really odd because in 2015, two of Kurt Russell's films were both westerns, where westerns aren't generally made these days, and in both films, again, spoiler alert here, guys, but I mean, you shouldn't really be listening if perhaps you've not seen it already. But yeah, in both films, Kurt Russell's character kind of
grows a moustache.
But yeah, undergoes that kind of grisly death in both films. So I thought it was quite funny. Maybe he had like a clause with his agent that year saying, these are the kind of roles you've got to get me. It needs to be a Western. I need to suffer a horrendous death. And I'm your man.
He's a good all-rounder, though, isn't he? Because he can play comedy, he can do action. He carries it off quite convincing. As the grizzly sheriff in this wild land, you quite believe it. I mean, even the film, like the idea of the troglodytes and how gruesome it becomes, none of it I considered, unfeasible.
No,
I'm not watching this film thinking, there's no way that would happen. I was nodding and thinking, this is a serious thing in the middle of the desert in America that you could get brutally scalped and cut into. But
Kurt Russell's got serious Western chops as well. He's, he was in Tombstone and, like we said, the Hateful Eight. So a bit of a crossover there with our first podcast of Pay Dirt with Val Kilmer. So yeah, I mean, and Lee, the other week you were talking about Breakdown, 1997 film with Kurt Russell, and that got me thinking before we'd even done the podcast, like what kind of good value Kurt Russell is. He's one of the few actors now. You see his name on a film, and you think, you know what, that's probably going to be quite good. I don't
think I've ever seen him put a bad performance in. I can't even remember too many bad films he's been in, to be honest.
No.
I have to say that when I read some reviews about the film, and most of the reviews are quite glowing, and the only negative reviews are people comparing other Kurt Russell films to this, which have got nothing to do with this film.
Yeah.
Just saying, I prefer The Thing. I mean, it's got nothing to do with this. It just got the same actor in.
The only way I could see you being disappointed by this film is if you're coming into it thinking it's going to be a horror film, and if you're not a fan of a Western, because it is, like you say, it's a classical. The pacing of it and everything is a classical Western.
Yeah, I mean,
with horror elements.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite early on in the film. Obviously the slitty throats at the beginning, and it's not very far into the film when a stable boy gets really brutally killed, does it? Yeah, I mean, I read a review where some people are suggesting racism, but I don't see it in that way in any shape in this film. And it just basically, it's quite honest. It's like it's set a generation, I'd say, after the Civil War. There's still, I suppose that kind of attitude towards the black people in the society. So you have like stable hands, and you have like and it's still predominantly white communities, but it's certainly not offensive. And when somebody is slightly racial in the bar, when they're talking about the troglodytes, there's like a Native American, isn't there?
You know who did this? There's only one group that hunts with these. Who? They don't have a name.
What kind of tribe doesn't have a name?
One that doesn't have a language. Cave dwellers.
You know where they are?
I have a general idea.
You'll take us to them?
I won't.
Because you're an Indian?
Because I don't want to get killed.
You're afraid of your own kind?
They're not my kind. They're a spoiled bloodline of inbred animals that rape and eat their own mothers.
Well, what are they?
Troglodytes.
What do they look like?
A man like you would not distinguish them from Indians, even though they're something else entirely.
He was like telling them where did people live, and he's like, and he picks up on anyone being that way. It's almost like the voice of 21st century.
Yeah, they make it very clear it's a lost race. It's not Native Americans. It's very much an offshoot. Yeah. They're almost like Neanderthal men, aren't they, really? They're almost like a different branch of humanity, really.
I think really they're just kind of depicted as kind of like the, an opposing force. more than anything else. It's not, it's not they're villains because they're Indians, or it's villains because they're Native Americans, or whatever it is. It's just they're the villains. In fact, I don't think any of the protagonists ever really make a comment about.
Oh yeah, they never mention. You can't even see skin color because they're like covered in all these markings, aren't
That's
they?
right.
And,
In fact, the makeup on the tribesmen and women looks a bit like what they deck out the cannibals from the old Italian movies in. A kind of grey kind of dried
Very
mud
dusty.
kind of look. Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't. I went through the film thinking, I wonder if this film is racist, which is, I suppose, a natural way to think now. But I really didn't think it was. You watch some films like of John Wayne's, for instance, and you do pick up those vibes from the story, no matter how they try and kind of quash it with certain scenes here and there. I didn't think it was. And like you said, they've got the Native American character who's kind of like the advisor earlier on in the film, and the Matthew Fox character says, "Oh, I've killed 116 Indians."
Yeah,
and the Indians kind of boast is that. He said, "That's no, it's a fact.
That's an ugly boast."
Yeah.
Not to sound too arty-farty art house film movies, but I honestly think the troglodytes are like symbolic. That is a symbol of nature, almost like the other and the nature. And I think that's the idea. They're just like this wild. America feels that it's conquered everything, but it hasn't yet. There's still boundaries to cross, and there's still boundaries which they're not welcoming. And I think the director purposely does that.
So it's like the flip side of Dances with Wolves. Rob was saying it's about America not having conquered everything yet, and I guess Dancing with Wolves is a bit like that. But tonally, it's a very, very different.
Oh yeah. I don't remember Kevin Costner being eviscerated.
And I'd pay to see that as well. Quite apart from David Arquette, I'd pay to see Kevin Costner eviscerated. He'd make a good go of it, wouldn't he? He'd probably charge about $300 million to Warner Brothers for the privilege. But
I think in many ways that's the simplicity of the film. It is a very simple plot. It's a film with the kind of plot we've seen in many times before, isn't it? I mean, it obviously makes a twist on this plot. Basically there's a threat to the town. The townspeople get together, and a band of heroes are banded together, and they go on an adventure and a rescue mission. It's something we've seen many times before, but obviously the twist is the cannibal element that makes it interesting, really.
And I think I think one of the strengths is once we're on the road with them, so to speak, on the trail with these characters, their stories tend to come out, and because of the runtime, I know it does seem long when you first go into it. It's like, oh my goodness, it's 132 minutes. But actually, it just gives the actors and the writers a bit of breathing room to give kind of depth to the lead character in the story. Yeah. I mean, even Kurt Russell, after he shot David Arquette in the opening scenes, is it the wife who's a doctor's assistant? She kind of implies that Kurt Russell is too quick. He's too quick with his trigger finger, and that he's shot people in the leg before. Just over a kind of a minor kind of disagreement, which I suppose to people watching it, that's what it might have appeared to be.
But as you see with the Patrick Wilson character, a leg injury in those days can be kill you off. Actually, that can be it. It can lead to gangrene. Yes. Can lead to amputations. That can be the end of you really functioning in those days. So when he shoots people in the leg, he's pretty much taking away their liberty completely.
There's some good. Another thing I like is the comedy all the way through the film, mainly from Chicory, which I loved his character. He's played by Richard Jenkins, who's no stranger to a comedy film. The Step Brothers, if you remember him in that, with Will Ferrell. I think he stole that movie in a way. And I love some of this, even like you say, some of the dialogue. They've got more time, haven't they, to spend on dialogue in the movie. And even the stuff where he's asking how does he read it? He can't manage to read a book in the bath. He's getting advice off the sheriff on that.
Yeah,
he's obviously
ad-lib.
He's not very educated. It's a lovable.
He's lovable. He's also too soft for that world, isn't he? He's about 20 years old. He's about 20 years old. We're supposed to be about 20 years older than the Kurt Russell character, but he's like a baby, isn't he? It's almost like he is the deputy.
In some scenes, he's quite canny. He's he seems like a good appreciation of what's going on, but I think his approach to it all is to kind of see it through almost kind of childlike eyes.
You think actually all the way through the film, you think he's definitely going to die because he visits his wife's grave and he basically doesn't have much to live for, does he? In that sense, he's like he's prepared to follow the sheriff to the end of the world and back, but he's a survivor. Again, it's two big surprises, isn't it? The guy who's got no leg and the old man are two survivors.
And I love the fact that at no time in this movie are any of the characters safe. You always feel that they're under threat. When they're sleeping out in the rough and they've got the ropes tied around the camp, and you just think at any moment, well, it does happen, doesn't it? At any moment, one of the characters could be picked off and kind of an arrow through the throat. So I love that. I love that in films because it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you interested in the film all the way through. Really.
It does, and I think that the runtime doesn't detract at all. It uses its 2 hours 10 minutes really well. I don't know if it would have been any longer than that necessarily, but I do wonder if this is the difference between like an independent production like this that seemed to make most of its money back from home video sales and streaming and whatnot, and a studio release where a film like this had it been made would have been in the region of about 90 to 95 minutes with lots of the character stuff, completely removed.
The director said he originally had a production company the budget was going to be about $6 million, but they were asking for so much to be cut out, so much of the violence to be cut out of the film that he abandoned that project and then sought to just make an indie film completely, which I'm glad he did in a way, because I think if you edit most of the violence out of this film...
You can imagine what they would have done to this film, how they would have changed it. It would have had a happy ending, I suppose, in that sense. Not a massage parlor happy ending, but
it might set it in a massage parlor. The happy ending.
Well, the film would have been called Bone Tomahawk then, wouldn't it? Actually, it's funny because before we recorded tonight, Cal sent a message about the film, and I sort of agreed with him. And although I enjoyed it, it's not one of those films. It would take a big ask for me to rewatch, and not because I've got really anything against it, or I think it's very well made and I think good characters, but it took a lot out of me. It was quite a big.
Yeah, it's quite grueling.
Yeah.
That scene at the end will haunt me for many a year, I think. Yeah.
Lee, I tell you what, Lee, if you want to see any more films that kind of leave you that feeling, I'm not sure if recommend is the right word, but perhaps Cannibal Holocaust might be for you.
To be honest, I'm a bit of a cannibal noob, really. I do like zombie films, but I don't particularly seek out cannibal films, really. So, yeah.
They're certainly the kind of film that you would watch once and kind of think, okay, that's a cannibal film. I've watched it. Yeah. And there's no need to watch Cannibal Holocaust. For me, anyway, there's no need to watch Cannibal Holocaust for a second time. I can appreciate the artist
unless you're on a den.
Message it kind of was giving. But, yeah, I will certainly not go back to that. Whereas this one, I don't know. I might watch it again, but then why? It's almost like the impact of it. The impact of it.
Would lose it on
first viewing. Yeah, you understand people who are like Kurt Russell fans.
Can we talk about the special effects, because the special effects, they very much go for practical effects, don't they? Which, especially for the violence, is really quite gut wrenching. It really works. The scenes in the cave where they used obviously like latex and those things and entrails and I don't know what, sheep or pig guts or whatever.
That's normally
it really works.
They would use the old days of shooting Dawn of the Dead or something like that. They go down the butchers and just get a load of entrails from there and use them in the special effects. But I don't know if that's what they did here out on locations here. But I guess they could have decayed bits in the studio, perhaps.
Yeah, I think maybe the part that's sickening about the violence is the fact is you've got the main star, Kurt Russell. He's like in the prison. He's been imprisoned in the cave, hasn't he? He's like behind these wooden bars, and he can't do anything to save his deputy. And what's going to happen?
So I love his reaction. It would have been tempting to have the reaction to be screaming or crying, but he just kind of he slumps back into himself, doesn't he? And just almost in disbelief and just like retreating into himself, which I thought was quite. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, his other deputy who's next to him can't watch it, can he? He like covers his eyes, whereas the sheriff watches it all. He sees the scalp and he sees the cut. You know.
He was also kind of reassuring him, giving him false hope. The cavalry's going to arrive. You're going to be avenged, and that's the kind of thing you want to be hearing. Well, he says that, doesn't he? That's the kind of thing I would want to hear if I was going through that.
Yeah, and in fact, doesn't Chicory say that to Hunt later on when he's kind of suffering as well?
Oh yeah, when he's pinned down, yeah.
Avenged. And as it turns out, they are correct, but perhaps a bit quicker than they might have envisaged.
It's quite an interesting. I mean, in that scene when the sheriff's pinned down, and then the cannibal's trying to work out how to use the gun, and he shoots him a couple of times, and he tries to shoot him in the balls, doesn't he?
That's right.
He puts the gun right, and the gun's run out of bullets. That's the only thing that saves him from that point. Do you think that was like a change in the idea that originally that was going to happen, and then he twisted back on it, or?
I don't know. I guess that was maybe the idea of that is it's like the troglodytes, how to emasculate the male by kind of shooting off the balls, because we find out later what they did to the pregnant women. They blinded them, they've lopped off their limbs, and so perhaps this would have been the first thing to do if you're emasculating another male in a troglodyte tribe is shoot off the balls or cut off the balls in their case.
Yeah,
maybe, I don't know, but then it doesn't work for him. Funnily enough, he's impotent. I suppose.
And it's quite ironic. It's quite ironic that the big hero of the film turns out to be the Patrick Wilson character, doesn't it?
Yeah, he literally comes in to save the day, which again in a film
Arthur,
of this nature, in a film of this nature, you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, he does a really good job because all the way through the film, he's constantly in pain, isn't he? Struggling with his leg, and that could be quite grating in another movie to watch somebody constantly moaning. But he does a very good job of, and it's quite a hard thing to get across, isn't it? The pain from the pain in a movie, to get that across to the viewer, but he does an exceptional job. And that bit where he's getting his leg reset after the fight, that was pretty painful.
Yeah.
Actually cuts away from that before it does it. I thought they would show that in graphic detail, but of course they don't.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah. And they did it with, when Sig Haig's character, Sig Haig, who's getting disemboweled at the beginning, he's very much off in the distance. So the director kind of spares the viewer early on in the film from seeing some of the violence, but then eventually you get the full Monty at the end.
Yeah, it's also. I mean, I read some review that it's allowed to be gratuitous with violence, but when the cowboys are having sex with their wives at the beginning, it's quite tame. So he's allowed to do physical violence, but not sexual violence, I suppose. Maybe he wants to get that tenderness at the beginning of the film and then really shock you at the end.
He can't do too much with that broken neck.
That's true. He's got to. Although he seemed quite fit, didn't he? Because he was underneath for a little while, and then they switched positions, didn't they? And he got. So I don't think he's just faking it.
Such a nice life, hasn't he? He's got a nice house. He's got a perfect 10, intelligent wife. It's all going well. Then he falls off a roof and breaks his leg, and his missus gets kidnapped by cannibals. He's not having a good year, this guy, is he?
This is a perfect summation of 2020. Really, this is Arthur O'Dwyer's life. It's like the equivalent.
All it needs is a virus.
Yeah, the zombie. Not zombies. Keep calling zombies. The troglovirus. Troglovid-19. Right. Anyway, so one thing I noticed was that Arthur O'Dwyer throughout the film, unless I completely misread this, he seems to have he's very kind of spiritual, religious. And there's one scene where they're sitting down at the campfire, and they're about to eat, and he's about to say grace to thankful for the food they're about to receive, and he kind of stops and he kind of breaks down as he's saying it, and I wonder if this scene was a bit him kind of questioning God at this point and the existence of God. But he, fair play to him and his character. He kind of comes back to it, and he finishes off the prayer. There's a few scenes later on where he kind of looks up to the sky and he says, maybe I misread this. Maybe this is just the Indians he's talking to. It might be. But I think he's looking up to the sky and he's saying, Are you watching this?
Is it him? I think he also says, I thought the world was supposed to be round, but out here I'm not so sure.
Yeah, is this his character questioning his faith? in parts because he does have an injury. He's kind of going through these trials, and yet at the end, and these trials are quite harsh and brutal, and yet at the end he comes away from it. And it's just because he's retained his faith, he's kept his faith.
Faith is mentioned a few times, isn't it? There's that bit where the two Mexicans get shot by Bruder, and Chicory is saying, I don't think you should have killed them. I mean, they were wearing a cross, weren't they? But I think ultimately Bruder is proved correct, isn't it? Because there obviously were. I think they get attacked.
They were rustlers, weren't they? So basically, not rustlers, so like a few. Literally, it's a bit later on. Another group of them tries to attack, doesn't it? So yeah.
Unless the murder of those two is what kind of brings the others on to think, right? Well, you've done that. We'll steal all your horses, you bastards.
Possibly, yeah.
So it's unclear, isn't it? Definitely, it might have been the right decision, and we just don't know. And this is,
I think that's the idea.
Things of the film, it doesn't kind of lay these things out for you like John Wayne in The Searchers would. Very, very kind of black and white depictions of villainy and heroism.
Yeah, the morality in it's pretty blurred, isn't it?
Yeah.
And even they question Bruder's morality, but he turns out sometimes to be quite wise and quite fun and quite heroic as well, doesn't it? The way his ending is quite brave, and he's doing it because he feels honoured to the doctor. But the doctor, because he grabbed the doctor to help at the beginning, he feels guilty about it. He feels that he has almost like an honourability to follow through on this journey.
Yeah, I suppose he's the only one in the group who hasn't, well, apart from Chicory maybe, who hasn't really got anything to go back to, hasn't he? Really, he's. I think he says at one point, I'm more intelligent than the rest of you because I'm the only one who's not got married. And Chicory
that's it, yeah.
I suppose he hasn't got too much to go back to. And an honourable death, I suppose, is his...
it's a warrior's death, isn't it? He dies like a warrior, which is the death he was looking for, I suppose.
I love the comedy throughout the film. That bit, you mentioned that bit in the bar, Carl, with the piano player, with the little sign. So he's like,
It's a funny little scene as well.
Yeah, and he's like, Bruder's like, why is it more expensive to have more songs? And the piano player's, well, I get tired after 2 songs. And then he pays the man, he turns the card round, and it's like, first, buy me a drink, first drink's a whiskey or something.
Yeah, no, it was a good little scene actually. That's what made me think of the actor James Tolkien. I thought, is that the chap? I wasn't sure, I have to say. I thought it might have been, and I looked at the credits at the end, and there he was. So budget for this. Now, Lee, you mentioned originally the projection was $6 million with the original financiers, but they wanted, a pretty compromised version of what we ended up with. Luckily, the budget for this was $1.8 million. Yeah, I must say, for a film that cost $1.8 million. I mean, even think about something like Over the Top, costing $25 million back in 1986. This costing 1.8. It looks good. It's a good looking film.
Yeah, it's 21 days filming, 78 locations, under $2 million. I don't know how he's done this.
Yeah,
and apparently most of the days they finished early. He was 1, 2, 3 takes at the most. Yeah, finishing early, unbelievable.
An impressive cast. You could have just gone with Kurt Russell in the lead, and then cast nobodies in the up and coming actors in the other roles.
Who played the troglodytes?
Now there's a question of. There we go. You can go off and do some research on that one.
I'll have to go and have a look, see if it's like Larry David or something.
Listeners, give our listeners an update on the next episode about the troglodyte actors. Budget $1.8. Now the box office for this, I noticed, was under $500,000. It's like $481,000.
Not good
box office. But I did some other searching, and this film seems to have made about an additional, at least, in the US, an additional $7 million on DVD, Blu-ray sales, and streaming income. So I mean, it's made its money back considerably, but probably through the home video market. And I don't think those figures took into account streaming, Blu-ray, and DVD for the rest of the world. So my guess is this would have been quite a profitable venture as a film.
Yeah. I think it will continue to be so, though. I think it is a future cult film, definitely, with the themes and everything. I think it will live on.
Certainly.
And it'll probably make handsome profit. Yeah.
I think it's I was quite shocked to see it 2015. In my brain, I thought it was more recent than that, but it's already 5 years old, and as is the Hateful Eight, which came out in the same year, which again also surprised me.
No, it completely passed me by, this one. I never wasn't aware of it.
I remember my dad watched it a couple of years ago, and how he came to watch it, I'm not sure, but I think they must have got it from the library or something like that. And I remember him telling me it's a film, I need to watch it, and that kind of put it on my list. But yeah, I hadn't got around to it until the podcast. No, I
can understand why he liked it.
Yeah, I'm certainly. I mean, he liked westerns of all kinds, so it would have been really right up his alley. I think sometimes he would have liked the kind of the extra edgy material that's in it as well. That would have certainly appealed to him.
So what's it gonna be, boys? Does this one rot in the morgue or make it on the helicopter to freedom?
I thought this film was artistically great. I really appreciate films with Kurt Russell in them because they're normally top drawer, good quality films. He doesn't normally do rubbish. He's been in the industry for years, since being a child actor, and he's obviously got a good grasp of what a good project is. And I really like the film, and there was just about enough violence for me. I mean, there's a couple of really shocking scenes near the end, but there's enough there just to kind of keep the horror fan in me satisfied throughout this film. But it was otherwise well made. I mean, with a few tweaks, it would work as just as a pure Western, I think, because it's got that breathing space. The characters are so well written. And you do kind of you care what happens to them, whatever horror it might be that kind of awaits them at the end of the film. So yeah, for me, I'm going to send Kurt Russell as Sheriff Hunt out of the cave, dangling from the helicopter with the big wound in his abdomen and the flask stuck in there. But he flies away to the safety of Bright Hope. There we go.
Oh, Bright Hope. That's the town, isn't it? Yeah, with about 200 people living there. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I went into this film. It's really nice, this, actually, when you go into a film knowing nothing about the film and you go into it quite open and you don't know what to expect. And I did it on a weeknight when I had work in the morning. I was tired and I put the film on thinking, I'll give myself half an hour. The film got me. I watched it right to the end, and then I had to stay awake for about another 20 minutes after the horrible visceration scenes. So playing on my mind for a little bit. And I love the characters in it. I mean, it's not a film I'll probably rush to see again. I may catch it one day, but it's definitely worth a watch. And if it's well written, well thought through, and for a debut movie for the director, it's a great work. So yeah, it makes me interested. I want to go out there and see a few other things he's done to see if they're just as good. So for me, definitely gets on the helicopter. He's got a big gaping wound in his abdomen, but it's maybe the hip flask keeps him alive. There's something in the hip flask which keeps
a bit of opium.
The opium. And as the helicopter's flying over the burning ruins, he just makes it. Gets home to his sweetheart. So I'll say Bone Tomahawk is definitely not going in the morgue.
For me, I think what more could you want from a movie? Really, you've got a fantastic cast. Kurt Russell, never seen him put in a bad performance. The dialogue's fantastic the whole way through. Despite it being quite a long movie and somewhat slow paced, it still keeps you engaged all the way through. I was never bored, never looking at my phone. The characters are likable. I cared about them. There's so many modern films now, you watch them, you don't really care about the characters when they get killed. So what? But these characters you do care about, even the ones that are a little bit flawed, like Bruder. At the end of the film, he becomes quite a well-rounded, likable character, quite a good guy, really. And the director, I think, did a fantastic job with the money that he had. The cinematography is perfect. Lots of nice wide shots of the LA desert.
Yeah, it looks great.
It was shot in 21 days, 78 locations, unbelievable. And I think there's a lot to like from this film. Yes, there's over-the-top horror elements that will put off some, but it's not really a horror film. It's definitely feels like a classic Western. I think if you love Westerns, you'll love this film. And I am definitely putting it on that. I'm walking it. I'm packing the bags and putting it on there. Freedom. Along with a flask, no troglodytes. The troglodytes are locked up in the morgue, safe and sound. And even Kurt Russell survived. He sealed up his wounds with the fire from the fire pit, and he survived, and he's on the helicopter to freedom, safe and sound.
That's unanimous, then, isn't it? Is that a first? No, I think we've had ones before, but that's unanimous save.
Bill and Ted was unanimous, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
I don't. The others, no. Maybe.
So that's a big save for Bone Tomahawk. What I can say, if you have enjoyed listening tonight, the next episode is falling in my worrying hands, and I'm choosing for episode 8, if you're interested, the 1984 sci-fi action big budget bomb, which starring Tom Selleck, Runaway. If you've never seen the film, give it a go. It's got killer robots in it, and it's got Kirstie Alley. You have to remember, this is a time when he kept on thinking Tom Selleck could be big box office, when he should have been Indiana Jones, but he ends up making this. So definitely give Runaway a go. Please watch Runaway before episode 8 so you can join in with the fun. It's a good one to watch.
Okay, Runaway.
Lovely.
Okay.
Well, it's a goodbye from him.
And it's goodbye.
And it's good night for me and them. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Next time.